Hi there, I want to ask you something. A question that might seem simple, but it can make us stop and think deeper than we expected. Have you ever believed you were truly in love, only to realize one day it was just a beautiful dream you created in your own mind? I once worked with a man in his early 60s, wise, weathered, and divorced. After a conversation about Stoicism, he looked at me and said, "I don't think I ever really loved her. I think I loved the way I imagined her. I loved who I wanted her to become." That line stayed with me for years. And I believe many of us, especially those of us who've lived more than half a lifetime, understand that truth on a deep, quiet level. You see, when we love someone, we often fall for the part of ourselves we place in them, our hopes, our dreams, our expectations. We don't just love who they are. We fall in love with who we want them to be. And when things fall apart, it feels like we lost that love. But in reality, what we lost was an illusion, something that was never really there to begin with. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic thinker, once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, it's not the thing itself that troubles you, but your judgment about it." That doesn't mean love is wrong, not at all. But when pain lingers too long, it's not because someone left us. It's because we're still holding onto a picture that never existed. I've met many people over 50 who still carry wounds from relationships that ended 10, 20, even 30 years ago. They don't miss that person. They miss who they were when they still had hope. And the hardest part to let go is not the person. It's the hope. I remember teaching a small Stoic workshop at a community center in Denver. An older widow, around 68, asked me a question I'll never forget. She said, "How do I know if what I felt was real love, or just something I made up in my own head?" I paused, then gently said, "Look at the silence inside you when you think of them. If there's too much noise, too many should-haves, maybe you're grieving a dream, not a person." We forget this sometimes. Real love doesn't make us lose ourselves. It doesn't take away our peace. But when we love the wrong way, we give up our peace, trying to hold on to something that was never meant to be held. And that's where Stoic philosophy quietly steps in, like a mirror, not to close your heart, but to help you see more clearly. Stoicism doesn't teach you to shut down. It teaches you to accept what is, as it is, no illusion, no resistance, no clinging doubt when you can tell the difference between what's real and what was imagined. You'll realize you didn't lose anything. You just woke up. Imagine this. It's a crisp autumn morning. The leaves are falling outside your window. You've planned a lovely day, coffee with an old friend, a phone call with your daughter, a book you've been reading, and then you get a message from someone who once meant everything. They tell you they've moved on. They've found someone else. They no longer feel the same. What do you do? A part of you wants to scream, to fight, to ask, why? Another part wants to reply with grace or pain or silence. But the Stoic within you pauses, takes a deep breath, and asks, "Did I really lose anything? Or was I just reminded that it's time I live more honestly with myself?" At this age, we've all been through enough. Breakups don't shatter us the way they did in our 20s. But the cuts, they go deeper. They stay longer. We don't cry right away anymore. We just go quiet, sometimes for months. But if you can sit with that silence long enough, you'll start to see something beautiful. You didn't lose love. You lost the fog surrounding it. And in that moment, you come back home to yourself. And That is where healing begins. I want to leave you with this, not from theory, but from experience. From the long nights after my first divorce. From the years I spent questioning what I did wrong. If you're there now, if you're in that space where you're still searching for clarity, for answers, for a sign that it all meant something, let this be it. You are the one you've been waiting for. There's nothing wrong with trusting someone, but what truly matters is knowing when to pull that trust back and save some for yourself. You don't need revenge. You don't need justice. The moment you stop living in an illusion, you're already free. And if you're watching this video, carrying a quiet pain inside your chest, I just want to say this. You didn't lose real love. You simply let go of an image your heart created, something to fill the emptiness. Let that emptiness stay open, because that's exactly where the light of peace finds its way in. No, in today's world, we're obsessed with something that sounds modern, even emotionally mature, something called closure. We want a clean ending, a final explanation, one last talk to say everything we never said. But ask yourself, have you ever actually received the closure you were waiting for? I've met so many people in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, still waiting for someone to come back and explain why they left, why they changed, why all those promises just disappeared like smoke. They wait, year after year, in silence, in confusion, in sleepless nights. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Stop debating what a good man should be, and just be one." And the Stoic understands a deep and simple truth. No one owes you an explanation. No one can give you closure, but you. I remember a man around 58, a former Navy officer who later became a site supervisor. He came to one of my Stoic workshops in a quiet rage. His wife of 30 years had left him with nothing but a note. No tears, no goodbye, no explanation. He looked at me and asked, "What am I supposed to do with this emptiness? How do I move on without closure?" I looked at him gently and said, "Maybe not having closure is the gift. It forces you to turn inward to find answers, not from them, but from yourself." The Stoic doesn't demand closure from the outside world. They go silent. They step back, and they end things within themselves, not because they're weak, but because they understand. Sometimes silence is the clearest goodbye you'll ever get. No more calls, no explanations, no chasing closure. I know that's not easy, especially at our age. We've seen so many endings, some spoken, many unspoken. And there's a part of us that still believes, if they didn't say goodbye, maybe the story isn't over. But let me offer you this image. You're standing on an old wooden bridge. Ahead of you is a foggy path. The one you loved walks into that fog and never looks back. You can stand there forever, waiting for them to return and say something kind. Or you can turn around and walk toward the sunlight of a new morning. Which will you choose? I've been there. A relationship of mine ended abruptly when I was 43. No text, no call, just gone. I spent months replaying everything, trying to figure out what I did wrong, trying to write a better ending in my head. And then, one morning, while I was meditating out on my porch, it hit me. I don't need to know what happened. I just need to know who I am and how I choose to live from this day forward. That's the power of Stoicism. It doesn't give you answers from others. It gives you permission to stop waiting. You don't need their final words. You are the one who gets to write the ending. And more importantly, you're the one who gets to start again. This is what Stoics practice every single day. Not numbness, but freedom from needing someone else's emotions to define your worth. Not reaching out doesn't mean playing games. It's an act of self-compassion, because sometimes saying more only deepens the wound. Not explaining doesn't mean arrogance. It's the understanding that if someone didn't see you clearly in the beginning, they won't understand you. Just because you explain harder, and not seeking closure isn't giving up. It's one of the highest forms of liberation, when you quietly close the door yourself, without needing anyone to hold your hand as you do it. So if you're in that space right now, if you're sitting alone, still waiting for a call that isn't coming, I just want you to know, you are not alone. And you don't need anyone else to complete your story. Let silence be your companion. Let your heart have space to heal, without being tied to unanswered questions. You are stronger than you think. And sometimes, silence is the bravest act of all. If you saw yourself in this story, drop a comment below. I choose the silence of a Stoic. And if you need a gentle reminder that your strength and value are still there, this video is for you. I'll see you in the next part, where we'll talk about how to turn pain into fuel for your rebirth. The Stoic way, you know. There's something strange about us humans. We often feel the urge to prove ourselves. When someone hurts us, leaves us, or belittles us, our first instinct is often, I'll show them. I'll prove I don't need them. I'll prove I'm better than ever. And then we start building a version of ourselves. A version meant for display. The perfect photos. The look how great I'm doing posts. The big declarations. But truth be told, most of the time, we're performing for someone who's no longer watching. And in doing so, we stop living for ourselves. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be simple, be modest, and live true to your nature." That's the most powerful form of defiance. So don't say you've moved on. Let your stillness tell the story. I remember a student of mine named Glenn, around 65 years old. He used to teach history. After his wife left him for a younger man, Glenn didn't post a thing on social media. For 2 years. No revenge. No vague quotes. No look at me now photos. Instead, he focused on rebuilding his life, quietly. He walked every morning. He reread the books he once taught. He kept a daily journal. He reconnected with old friends. But the most important thing he did, he learned to forgive, not her, but himself, for carrying the pain too long. 3 years later, I ran into Glenn. At a conference, his eyes were clear, his posture strong, his smile warm and effortless. He didn't need to say, "I made it." I could feel it. We're so easily tempted by validation, especially when we're hurting. We want someone to see we're doing fine. We want them to realize they were wrong to leave us. We want them to see our strength. But the truth is, real peace doesn't need to be seen. Real peace is when you can look in the mirror and see a person who is simply living honestly, not performing, not posting, not shouting to the world that you've healed. Because healing, real healing, always happens in silence. Let me ask you something today. When was the last time you did something kind for yourself? Without telling anyone? Not for praise. Not to share in a group chat, but simply to nourish your soul. Maybe it was a few minutes of meditation at sunrise. Maybe a quiet cup of tea. An old book you once loved in your youth. Or a phone call to someone you've always meant to check in on, but never did. It's those small, quiet acts that become the true foundation for our healing and our rebirth. A Stoic never has to announce, "I'm doing better now." They just get better. They live, they work, they love, with quiet depth and honest simplicity. And one day, the person who once hurt them might stumble into a moment, a glance, a conversation, a chance encounter, and they'll feel it. They'll realize, I lost something, and I won't get it back. You don't need to retaliate with words. Your growth is the loudest response of all. They may never apologize. They may never come back. They may never truly understand what you've survived, but you will know. And sometimes that's all that matters. So today, I invite you not to prove anything, but to actually be okay. Don't say you've healed. Live like you have. And then, without a single word, the world will feel the change in you. Have you noticed? In a world where everyone posts, everyone explains, everyone shares, silence becomes something rare and incredibly powerful. I'm not talking about coldness or indifference. I'm talking about intentional silence, the kind that comes from understanding that not every battle needs words. Not every pain needs a story. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Do not allow the noise of others to disturb your peace. Let your mind remain still, like a calm lake before the wind." You know, I used to be great at reacting. If someone said something unfair, I argued. If someone hurt me, I wrote long messages. I explained, I pleaded. I thought, if I just said the right thing, they'd finally understand. If I just spoke from the heart, they'd come back. But I was wrong. Silence isn't surrender. It's the choice of someone who's grown. I remember a woman named Marion. In her early 50s, she ended a 27-year marriage and told me afterward, I didn't say a final word. I didn't need to. Because I knew I was walking toward the light, and he would be left to face the darkness he created. And you know what happened? 8 months later, her ex-husband sent a long message. Not to reconcile, but to admit, your silence forced me to face myself. A Stoic understands something simple, yet profound. There's no statement louder than silence when it's chosen wisely. Because when you don't react, when you don't retaliate, when you stop trying to teach them a lesson, you send the clearest message of all. I no longer live in your emotional universe. I once asked a student of mine, if someone insults you and you don't react, who's left holding that negative energy? He paused and said, they are. Exactly. When you stay silent, you break the chain of emotional reaction. You keep your energy. You refuse to be dragged into a battle that doesn't need to be fought. Now, I know that's not easy, especially for those who have loved deeply, who have once given their trust without question. In those moments, silence can feel like bottling up the pain, but if practiced the right way, you'll come to realize silence is the space where your soul starts to speak. No more noise from others. No more searching for answers out there. Just you, returning to that quiet place inside that says, I am enough. I don't need noise to prove anything. I have a little habit. Whenever I feel triggered or emotionally shaken, I give myself 24 hours of silence. No emails, no texts, no reactions. Just me, sitting with my thoughts, jotting down a few lines in my journal, brewing a warm pot of tea, and listening. And you know what? More often than not, the thing I had to say doesn't feel important anymore. A Stoic doesn't win by striking back. They win by choosing not to step into a meaningless war. Think back to the last time you stayed quiet instead of reacting. Didn't you feel more at peace? Didn't you feel stronger? Because silence is the weapon of someone who truly knows themselves. And if you're going through a tough season, if someone's trying to bait you, posting things to get a reaction, sending messages to drag you into their drama, choose silence, not because you're weak, but because you've grown strong enough not to need to speak. If this speaks to you, I'd like to invite you to leave a quiet note in the comments below. I choose the silence of the Stoic. Not for applause, just as a small promise to yourself. And I'll see you in the next part of this journey, where we'll talk about how to use pain not to get revenge, but to rebuild yourself into someone they'll never get back. Have you ever noticed, when we're hurt, insulted, or abandoned, our first impulse is usually the same? We want to argue, to explain, to make things right. They say something cruel, and we want to fire back. They lie about us, and we feel the need to defend ourselves. They leave, and we chase, longing for one final explanation. But somewhere in the middle of all those messages, all those sleepless nights, we begin to see the truth. We're stuck in a game, and the other player has already walked away. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you are offended, ask yourself, does this harm my character? If it does not, then let it not disturb your mind." The weak react by arguing, the strong choose to evolve. I once had a friend named David, a retired engineer, 63 years old, divorced after nearly 35 years of marriage. His ex-wife didn't just leave, she left with a false story. A story that made many people turn their backs on him. David once told me, "I wanted to stand up and set the record straight. I wanted to tell the whole truth. But then I asked myself, is it really worth it?" Instead of defending himself, he chose silence, and then he began to rebuild. He learned how to cook, something he'd never done in his life. He started going to the local library every afternoon, joining book circles with college students. He picked up photography and began uploading breathtaking nature shots to a website, anonymously. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was simply evolving day by day. You see, not everyone deserves your reaction. Not every comment requires a reply. Not every person who walks away needs to be chased. Because every time you step into an argument, you're showing them you're still living inside the emotional universe. They've already left out. The strong don't live there anymore. They've chosen a different path, quiet, steady, and much more powerful. I once asked an older gentleman, about 70 years old, during a community talk in Santa Fe, "What do you do when you're hurt?" He gave me a soft smile and said, "I usually garden." I asked why. He said, "Because when I'm digging in the dirt, planting something new, tending to life, my heart doesn't have room to hold on to meaningless conversations. I just sat there in silence." Because that is Stoicism. Not in lofty words, but in small, steady actions that pull us out of emotional quicksand. Evolution isn't a statement. It's a process. One day, you start eating a little healthier. One day, you journal instead of scrolling through Facebook to check on them. One day, you no longer replay conversations that never happened. And then, you realize you're not in the same place anymore. You've stepped into a world where they no longer hold power over you. Let me ask you something. If that person stood in front of you today, would you still feel the need to say anything? Or would you simply smile and thank them for leaving, because their absence led you to the path you were meant to walk all along? You don't have to argue anymore. They don't have to understand. You don't need to win that old story. You're writing a new chapter now. One where you are the main character. And you're evolving every single day. If you're still torn between setting the record straight and choosing peace, I hope you'll choose the second, because the strong don't chase being right. They reclaim themselves. If what I've shared today resonates with you, I invite you to leave yourself a quiet reminder in the comments. I choose to evolve, not to argue. And I'll see you in the next part, where we'll talk about how to use pain as fuel for rebirth, the Stoic way. You know, there comes a time in life when you no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. You don't care to show the world that you're doing better, over it, or whole again. You just want one thing: peace. Nothing more. Nothing less. Back in my early 30s, I used to think, if someone leaves me, I'll make them regret it. I'll become successful, stand out, make them wish they'd stayed. I thought that was motivation. But later I realized it was just a clever trap set by my ego. Because every time I did something just so they would see, I was still orbiting the emotional gravity of someone who had already walked away. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let not your actions be guided by the desire to impress others." The Stoic doesn't prove anything. They rebuild quietly because it's the right thing to do, not because someone's watching. Let me tell you about a man named Walter. He was 67 when he lost both his wife and his career in the same year due to a major financial collapse. At first, he moved in with his sister, didn't go out, didn't talk much. People were worried. They feared he'd spiral, but he didn't. He chose to rebuild from the inside out. No social media posts, no declarations of a comeback, no bitterness, no pity parties. Just quiet consistency. Every morning he walked. Every evening he read. He relearned how to use a computer. He gardened. He cooked for himself. He started teaching himself a new language. 3 years later, Walter opened a small life skills class at the local library, just for retirees. No one recognized him as the man who once got knocked down by life, because he wasn't trying to be back. He was simply living with the calm dignity of a man who'd come home to himself. You see, proving is what the unsettled mind does. Building quietly is what the grounded soul chooses. You don't need to post about your success after the storm. You don't have to explain how strong you've become. You just need to rise early each day, do what's right for you, and let that be enough. Here's a small principle I live by. If I can't say it calmly, I won't say it. Let my actions speak instead. There was a time I ran into someone from my past at a coffee shop. Years had gone by. She looked at me, a brief flash of surprise in her eyes. I nodded, smiled, turned away. No words needed, because I no longer needed her to understand who I was. I understood myself, and that was enough. Are you on that journey right now? Rebuilding quietly, with no spotlight, no applause, no recognition, yet every day, moving one step closer to wholeness? If you are, I just want to say this: I see you. And I know you're doing the most extraordinary thing a human can do. Coming home to yourself. You don't need to say you're doing better. You don't need to show anyone. Just live, quietly, steadily, and let time tell the story for you. If these words speak to you, leave a small personal commitment in the comments. I don't need to prove. I just need to rebuild. And I'll see you in the next part, where we'll explore a profound truth together. You're not here to beg for answers, you are the answer. Let me ask you something. Have you ever thought about revenge? Now, I don't mean anything extreme. Not hatred, not violence, not anything that weighs on your conscience. I'm talking about that quiet, simmering feeling, that wish for someone to pay for what they did, or at least to finally realize how much they hurt you. And if you've ever felt that, I get it. Truly. Because I've been there too. Then one day, I read a line from Marcus Aurelius that stopped me in my tracks. A line that became one of the guiding lights of my life. The best revenge is to be unlike the one who caused the injury. That line, it made me pause. It silenced me in the best way. You see, our first instinct after getting hurt is often to strike back. They went cold, so we try to be colder. They left, so we try to glow up and make them regret it. They lied, so we want to scream the truth and reclaim justice. But the moment we do that, we become like them. We stop being ourselves. I remember a woman once told me this during a small group session. She was 64. My ex-husband cheated on me. I wanted to become this strong, unshakable woman who needed no one. But the more I tried, the more something inside me felt off. I asked her, "Did you ever truly like that colder version of yourself?" She paused and shook her head. Here's what I've learned. Revenge isn't about hurting them the way they hurt you. Revenge is about no longer needing them to define you. You don't need to make them feel what you felt. You just need to live with more kindness, more truth, more peace, not to prove anything to one, but because that's who you truly are. And no one gets to take that away from you. A Stoic doesn't seek revenge through retaliation. A Stoic seeks revenge through non-resemblance, through not becoming what broke them. You betrayed me? I won't betray back. I'll remain honest, because honesty is my value, not some bargaining chip. You disrespected me? I don't need to earn your respect. I just need to continue respecting myself. You left me in ruins? I won't throw the broken pieces at you. I'll rebuild with the calm you could never shake. I still remember a man named Howard, around 59 years old. He lost both his job and his reputation because of a partner's betrayal. The whole town talked. People he once called friends turned their backs on him. But he didn't fight back. He didn't sue. He didn't write a public letter to clear his name. He simply moved away, started over. He took a humble job teaching English at night to immigrants. 10 years later, Howard had become one of the most respected members of his new community, not because of a title, but because of his calm presence and his kindness. Someone once asked him, "Why didn't you do anything to fight back?" He smiled and said, "If I had become like them, I would have lost the rest of me." You see, forgiveness doesn't mean they deserved it. Forgiveness means you deserve peace. Not becoming like them. That is the real victory. Not with words, but with difference, with depth, with a path they'll never walk, because they're not deep enough to understand it. You don't need to become the version of you that gets revenge. Become the version that grows and becomes free, because the best revenge isn't that they hurt too. It's that you don't hurt anymore. If you see yourself in this story today, leave a quiet message in the comments. I'm not like them. I choose freedom. And I'll see you in the next part, where we'll talk about rebirth and silence, and how to return as a version no one ever saw coming. Have you ever felt a pain so deep, so silent, that you thought you'd never rise again? I'm not talking about the visible kind. Not the pain people ask you about, but the kind no one sees. No one knows, just you. And the echoing emptiness inside. Some people leave you and think, "He'll never make it without me. She's never going to bounce back from this." They expect you to crumble, but what they don't realize is that rock bottom moment, that's when your real journey begins, and it's a path they can't follow. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And you have the power to revoke that at any moment." I still remember the first time I truly fell apart. It wasn't a physical collapse. It was a quiet spiritual unraveling. Work fell apart. Someone I trusted left. I was sitting alone in a small rented apartment during the coldest winter in Chicago. No one knew. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat in silence. And in that silence, I started to hear something I had ignored for years. A faint whisper from within. Not the question, "Why is this happening to me?" but instead, "What am I going to do with this?" You know, no one steps into their truest, strongest self when life is easy. We only change when there's nothing left to cling to. That's when the transformation begins. Pain often feels like the end of the road, but in truth, it's the beginning. Sometimes, a door slams shut, and it forces you to build an entirely new house. One that's stronger, deeper, more you. I once met a man named Rick, around 60 years old. He used to be a successful businessman until he lost it all. The bankruptcy took his home, his career, and even his family, while working manual jobs just to get by. He stumbled into a quiet passion, bonsai trees. The same hands that once signed million-dollar contracts were now gently tending roots and shaping tiny branches. 10 years later, Rick wasn't just a beloved bonsai artist. He had become a speaker, inspiring others who'd fallen hard. And he told me something I'll never forget. "I didn't rebuild my life, I rebuilt myself, and pain laid the first brick." They thought you'd stay broken, but what they didn't realize is, you didn't break. You transformed. Not overnight, not in the spotlight, but slowly, quietly. With every breath, every sunrise, you chose to stand instead of stay down. You don't have to be this strong version of yourself right away. You just have to not abandon yourself in the moment that hurts. Breathe. Listen. Start again. Even if all you do is make your bed, brew a cup of tea, or write a single honest sentence in a journal, because it's in the rubble that we learn how to rebuild, not the old home, but a new refuge, one that finally belongs to you. I don't know where you are in your journey right now, but if you're hurting, I want you to hear this. You're not falling apart, you're being reshaped. You haven't lost everything. You're being handed a chance to build it all back your way. And if someone out there ever assumed you'd never make it, let your quiet rebirth be your answer, not with noise, but with unshakable silence. You know, there are people who walk out of our lives thinking they've got us all figured out. They think they know how we'll react. They believe we'll be stuck in grief, or bitterness, or regret. They assume we'll never move on, that we'll never grow, that we'll never thrive. So they leave, believing their version of you is the final draft. They'll never go anywhere. That's the conclusion they carry. But here's the truth. You don't need to correct them. You don't need to change their mind. You just need to keep growing, because your quiet growth is the heaviest weight on the memory they once had of you. Marcus Aurelius never talked about proving yourself. He talked about growing quietly. He said, "Don't waste energy trying to become something in the eyes of others. Just live with integrity and let others notice if they're capable of seeing it." I remember a woman named Helen, 58 years old, a retired nurse. She was betrayed by the man she'd loved for over 20 years. He left for a younger woman, and his parting words, "You're a good person, but you never changed. You're just not attractive anymore." It hurt. It hurt deeply, but Helen didn't lash out. She didn't post anything. She didn't seek revenge. She just started walking every morning. She read more. She took a flower arranging class. And one day, she opened a small flower shop by the sea, a quiet space where the elderly and lonely could come for warmth, peace, and a little beauty. 3 years later, her ex stopped by. He saw Helen standing in the sun, surrounded by flowers and soft laughter. He froze. Not a word came out, because she was no longer the woman he once knew. You see, the memory they hold of you is the old version, but they don't get to define who you've become. Every time you choose sleep over overthinking, every time you go for a walk instead of checking their social media, every time you read a book instead of writing a long message to explain yourself, that's one more time you shatter their version of you and build a new one by your own hands. I used to ask myself, if the person who hurt me ever saw me again, what would they think? And then I realized it doesn't matter. What matters is when I look in the mirror, I see someone who no longer needs validation from the past. Your growth isn't for revenge, it's for liberation. So you no longer live in the limits someone else placed on you. Maybe they once belittled you, chose someone else, said you wouldn't amount to anything. Then go ahead, quietly do everything they thought you couldn't. Not to prove them wrong, but simply to outgrow their story about you. Because growth doesn't announce itself. It radiates in your eyes, in your walk, in the life you're living. A life they no longer have access to. And if anyone once thought you'd never survive without them, let the person you've become today be your quietest, most powerful reply. No words, no arguments, no turning back. Just a new you, deeper, wiser, freer. You know, there's a truth I only learned halfway through my life. Not all pain comes to destroy you. Some pain comes to forge you. And that's one of the deepest truths I've found in nearly 30 years of living by Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. I know for many people, especially those over 50, pain is no stranger. It has not. It has stayed. And sometimes, it's stayed too long. Some carry the pain of losing a loved one. Some carry the pain of betrayal. Some carry the weight of a lifetime of sacrifice that no one ever noticed. But you know what? It's in those moments, the ones where it feels like you have absolutely nothing left to hold on to, that you discover a strength you never knew you had. Once met a man named Carl. He was 71, a war veteran, wounded badly when he was young. Then, just after retiring, he lost his wife in a car accident. He lived alone, quiet, reserved. But if you ever sat down and spoke with him, like I did, you'd notice something right away. There was a stillness in him, a quiet strength. I once asked him, Carl, what kept you standing after all that? He smiled, took a slow sip of his coffee, and said, I didn't stand in spite of the pain. I stood because of it. You see, a Stoic doesn't run from pain. They face it. They walk through it. They use it, like fire for the forge. No complaining, no blaming, no playing the victim. Just a quiet resolve that says, this won't break me. It'll rebuild me, stronger, deeper, clearer. I'm not saying this to minimize whatever you're going through. I'm saying it so you know, it can become part of the strength you carry if you know how to turn it into fuel. Picture this. Two people walk through the same storm. One curses the sky, shivers, soaked and angry. The other takes off their coat, lifts their chin, feels the rain on their face, and keeps walking. Same rain. Different response. And that response, that choice, makes all the difference. So if you're hurting today, I want you to remember this. It's not the pain that's breaking you. It's just that you haven't learned how to use it yet. And you can start small. Wake up a little earlier. Write a few honest lines in a journal each day. Move your body, even just a walk. Do something for you, quietly, just because. Because step by step, pain stops being a weight you carry and starts becoming the resistance that builds you. You don't need to be okay today. You just need to keep moving. Keep learning how to carry the pain without letting it pull you under. Because to a Stoic, pain doesn't destroy, it refines. Have you ever been there? After a breakup, after betrayal, after the ending of something you thought would last. Sitting alone at night, asking yourself, why did this happen? What did I do wrong? Did they ever really mean it? You wait for an explanation, an apology, a late-night message, some kind of sign that you mattered. I get it. I've been there. More than once. There was a time I sat for 3 straight hours just to write one message. And then I deleted it. I thought, if I'm sincere enough, maybe they'll understand. If I'm clear enough, maybe they'll come back. But you know what? Not every question needs an answer. And not every silence is empty. Sometimes you are the answer. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, stop seeking approval from others. When you live with integrity, you don't need anyone's validation. I once met a man named Samuel, 66 years old, a retired doctor. His wife had left him for someone younger after nearly 40 years of marriage. He told me, I used to wake up every morning asking myself, why did she do it? And then one day, while I was watering my plants, I stopped and asked, do I really need to know the answer to live well? He smiled and said, that's when I realized I didn't. I wasn't the question anymore. I had become the answer. You don't need to beg for understanding from someone who no longer wants to understand you. You don't need closure from someone who chose to walk away. You don't have to pull them back just to close a chapter that you have the power to close. With dignity and self-respect. Something remarkable happens when you stop chasing validation from the outside. You begin to see your own worth, and it's no longer tied to who stays or who goes. You stop being the one waiting for answers. You become living proof that a human being can rise, rebuild, and continue to live with kindness, even when no one apologizes and no one explains. Picture this. You're sitting in a small room. There's a storm outside. Someone you cared about has walked away, and you're alone. You look around. No one's coming to comfort you. No one's saying, I'm sorry. But then, you stand up. You fold the blanket. You wash your face. You write something down. You make yourself a cup of tea. And you begin to live. No more questions. Just your full presence in your own life. You're not here to beg for clarity. You're not here to send that 3rd or 4th message hoping for a kind reply. You're not here to convince anyone to stay. You're here to be you, without needing to explain. You're here to live a life where peace doesn't depend on others, but flows quietly from within. And if you're still waiting for someone to come back and explain. Let me tell you something from the heart. You don't need that to move forward. Because you, with your steady presence, your quiet strength, and your calm resolve, you are already the answer. Have you ever heard someone say, "Forgive them so you can set them free"? Yeah, I used to believe that. I heard it often. And for a while, I thought that was what forgiveness was all about. But over time, after walking through the long path of healing, I came to understand something Stoicism had been whispering to me all along: forgiveness. It's not about giving them peace of mind. It's about giving yourself freedom. Marcus Aurelius never said forgiveness was a moral duty to others. What he did teach was this: do the right thing and move on. Don't let anger toward others live in your mind even 1 minute longer. Let me share a real story with you. A few years ago, I met a man named Jeffrey, 72 years old. He lived alone in a small house on the edge of town. One day, during a Stoic discussion group, he opened up. He said he'd been holding a grudge against his younger brother for nearly 30 years. It was over money, land, and broken promises. He said, "I don't hate him, but I just can't forgive, because if I do, doesn't that mean I'm saying he was right?" I paused, then gently asked him, "If you've carried that resentment for the last 30 years, has it made you stronger? Has it helped you sleep better?" He looked down, and after a long silence, tears in his eyes, he said, "No, it's only turned me into someone I barely recognize anymore." You see, forgiveness isn't approval. Forgiveness doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't make you weak. And it's not about letting them off the hook. Forgiveness is about setting yourself free. It's about letting go of a weight you were never meant to carry this long. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. I once wrote this line in my journal: "I forgive, not for you, but because I refuse to carry you in my mind another day." A Stoic doesn't let the past rule their life. They don't get stuck in the idea that someone has to pay before they can feel whole again. They take a different path. They let the past rest so the present can truly live. I know, for many watching this, forgiveness feels impossible. Some wounds are deep. Some betrayals can't be healed with a single sentence. But you don't need to forgive all at once. You just need to begin with one small act of not carrying the pain every day. One morning when you don't bring them up. One night of sleep where they don't haunt your dreams. One glance in the mirror where you say, "I choose not to let the past define me anymore." Forgiveness isn't a gift you give them. It's a gift you give yourself. It means you're no longer tied to the past. You're no longer waiting for someone to say "I'm sorry." You're no longer letting someone who let you go control your happiness. You come home to yourself, free, lighter, stronger. There's something I often say to friends my age: we've come this far in life. Do we still need to keep score? It sounds like a simple question, but I've seen the quiet in their eyes when I ask it, because they understand winning against others, that's easy. But winning against yourself, that's a lifelong journey. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The greatest victory is not being led by emotion or desire. It's a victory of the soul, not of the battlefield." A Stoic doesn't need to join every argument. Doesn't need to clap back at every criticism. Doesn't need to prove they're better than anyone else. All they need to know is this: am I calmer than I was yesterday? Did I live more honestly, more deeply, more gently today? I once had an older student, Mr. James, 69 years old, a retired lawyer. He spent his whole career winning arguments, winning cases, winning approval at parties, at the dinner table, in the courtroom. But after retirement, he fell into a deep depression. Why? Because there was no one left to win against. No reason left to prove anything. One day in a Stoic class he shared with us, I realized, all those years, I wasn't living to know myself. I was living to outdo others, and forgot how to sit with myself. From that day on, he started a small daily habit, writing down one internal victory each day. Today, I held back a snappy comment to my wife. Today, I listened without interrupting. Today, I paused to watch the sunset instead of rushing to find something more productive to do. And after a few months, he said to me, now when I go to bed at night, I don't ask, was I better than anyone else today? I just ask, was I more at peace than I was yesterday? Winning over yourself is a silent battle. There's no applause, no medals, no standing ovations. But it's the one fight you must never walk away from. You don't need a clever comeback to win over someone who insulted you. You don't need to become wildly successful just to prove your worth to the one who left you. You don't need to be an overnight success to silence the world's doubts. You just need to win over yourself, day by day, moment by moment. Win over your impulses, win over resentment. Win over fear, over the urge to rush, over the need to be seen. I want you to reflect on today. What did you win inside yourself? Was it an angry reaction you held back? A moment of wanting to give up that you moved through instead? A craving to send that just one more message, but you let it go? An old sadness knocking on your door at midnight? So you've already won something massive today. You don't need admiration. You don't need someone to finally say, you're doing great. You only need to look at yourself truly and say, today, I moved a little closer to the light, because the Stoic doesn't try to outdo others. They simply aim to outgrow the person they were yesterday. Have you ever waited for someone to regret what they did to you? You don't need to answer that out loud. I know many of us have. We wait for them to finally realize what they did. Have you ever waited for that day, the day they show up at your door, look you in the eye, and say, I was wrong? Waited for comfort. Waited to get back a piece of your dignity. Waited just to feel like you weren't meaningless in that whole story. I understand. I used to wait too, but let me tell you something. The more you hope for their regret, the more you keep yourself tied to that wound. Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Freedom begins the moment you expect nothing from anyone. I once had a student named Mary. She was 63. Her husband had an affair and walked out 15 years ago. No apology, no explanation. Every year, on her birthday, she waited for a call. Just one sentence, I was wrong. But that call never came. One day, she told me, I realized that if I keep waiting for him to feel regret, then deep down, I'm still letting him hold the keys to my peace, even though he walked out of my life a long time ago. You see, we think their regret will set us free. But real freedom doesn't come from their apology. It comes the moment you stop needing it. They may never look back. They might move on, never think of you again. They might go through life convinced they were right, and that's their path. Yours is to make sure your heart doesn't stay stuck waiting for something you can't control. The Stoic doesn't live for someone else's regret. They live so that they won't regret not moving forward. I once wrote this in my journal. After a long, restless night, I don't need anyone to come back and say sorry. I just need to stop hesitating when it's time to move on. You don't need anyone's approval to know your worth. You don't need them to come back just to prove you mattered. You already know you loved fully. lived honestly, and learned something no one can take away, whether they regret it or not, whether they ever see it or not. That's their story. Your story is this: let it go. Let yourself be free, not tomorrow, but today. And if any part of this message speaks to you, leave a comment below the video and say, I don't need their regret, I just need my freedom. Thank you for listening. With a heart that's been through pain, but still chooses peace.